Hello and welcome to Kingston Now. I'm Jimmy Buff. This week we're going to talk about the very real and growing problem of hunger in Kingston and the Hudson Valley and meet some people who are on the front lines of the battle to feed people locally. Later in the show we'll meet Reverend Darlene Kelley of the United Methodist Church in Kingston, who has an active food pantry here. But up first is Jan Whitman and Ron Van Wormer, the director and associate director of the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley. Welcome, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Jan, tell me about the origins of the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley, because you've been with them for a long time, right?
I have. In 1987, Regional Food Bank of Northeastern New York, which is our main office, our parent organization, was looking for a VISTA volunteer to help bring member agencies on board the food bank. And there was no Food Bank of the Hudson Valley, no building. So I happened to be leaving a job at WDST in Woodstock. Done quite a bit of work helping to make PSAs, and thought I might like to try something in the nonprofit world. Regional Food Bank ran an ad for a VISTA volunteer. So for stipend money, basically gas money, I started working for Regional Food Bank as a coordinator for this area. And within a relatively short amount of time, we decided that having a branch down here, a warehouse, would be a good idea, and we started the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley.
What is the organization like? I mean, how does it work from top down?
We have a main office in Latham, New York, Regional Food Bank of Northeastern New York, and our board of directors is located there outside of Albany. And the entire service area runs from the Canadian border all the way down to the lower Hudson Valley. Our branch takes care of providing food for member agencies in 6 of the lower Hudson Valley counties. So it's quite a large area, that whole eastern part of New York State, for the entire organization. But our part is to make sure that the people of the lower Hudson Valley have the kind of resources they need during difficult times.
Now, in a previous show, we had Diane Reeder from the Queen's Galley on, and I know that amongst many organizations like the Queen's Galley, the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley supplies food and supplies to those folks. How does that work, Ron?
Well, what the food bank does, the food bank is the center, and what we do is we have a 55,000 square foot warehouse. We have trucks that go out and we collect food from wholesalers and retailers, and we bring it, and farmers, and we bring it back to the food bank, and from there it's distributed to the food pantries. So there are about 380 feeding programs in the 6 counties in the lower Hudson Valley that we service. So we're distributing between 9 and 10 million pounds of food every year to those agencies.
And those agencies include not only emergency feeding programs like food pantries, soup kitchens, and emergency shelters, but any nonprofit that provides food to a significant number of low-income people can apply for membership in the food bank. So if you have a senior program, an after-school program, alcohol and drug rehab program, you can apply for membership and get food from the food bank.
Is all the food donated to you guys from these organizations, from the farmers and the food providers?
Most of the food is donated, and we also have a co-op that we do with the food pantries, where we buy food in mass and then sell it, say basically, just almost at cost to the food pantries. Because there's some things you just can't get donated. You know, sometimes it's some foods that are just staples, or sometimes you just don't have. So you have to have them on hand so that people can get a balanced nutritional diet. So things like rice and milk and mashed potatoes and things like that that are staples that you really have to have, and you don't always get them donated.
And because we're buying cooperatively, which is why we call it co-op food, with other food banks, it's tons of food that we're buying from the food industry, which lowers the case price so that when we offer it to agencies, they're paying less for it than they would if they were buying at retail.
Tell me about the donation aspect of the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley, because I've heard PSAs on the radio talking about, and people like yourselves talking about, how with a $1 donation you can buy X amount of dollars worth of food, which is better than actually getting food donated to you from the population. Tell me how that works.
Well, what we do is we have agreements, and part of what I do is I look for new donors. And we have agreements with them so that we can go on a regular basis, on a regular schedule, to pick up the food that they're donating. Things like Freihofer's has day-old bread, and we'll get that. And that comes back to the food bank, and then we can distribute it. So, and we go to Walmart and C&S wholesalers, grocer wholesalers, who donate tremendous amounts of money, of food, I mean. And then we can distribute that at such an incredibly low cost. So for every dollar, as you say, that's donated to the food bank, we can supply 10 to 12, up to $15 worth of food to the food pantries.
The dollar that you are donating goes toward the maintenance of the warehouse, the forklifts, the trucks, the drivers that enable us to take the food that's donated and provide it to agencies who then make sure that the clients get it. So the dollar isn't going for food, it's going to create the operation that allows us to take donated food in tons and millions of pounds of food each year to get out to about 370 agencies.
You're watching Kingston Now. More with Jan Whitman and Ron Van Wormer of the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley when we return. Welcome back to Kingston Now. This week we're talking about feeding the hungry in our midst, and with us once again is Jan Whitman and Ron Van Wormer of the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley. So there are hungry people in our midst, in America, in Ulster County, in Kingston, and that's kind of extraordinary when given the wealth of this nation. How do we explain that hunger is still an issue in America?
The number of people reaching that line of hunger is growing all the time, too. You know, the number of people that we see coming to the food bank and using the food pantries is increasing. In the short time I've been there, there have been about 40 new feeding programs started just in the 6 counties in the lower Hudson Valley. And it's growing because, as you see every day, people are losing jobs and they're losing their homes. And the people who are coming to the food bank and the food pantries, these are people that have to choose between buying food or paying their rent, or buying food or they're paying their medical bill or their utility bill. And so, you know, what we're providing is just essential because there's so many people that are actually going to sleep in America hungry, and that number is growing.
And the face of hunger has changed. When I first started working for the food bank, many of the emergency feeding programs were set up to provide food at the end of the month. As people who were using social services, welfare, food stamps, ran out of benefits before the end of the month, they would go to food pantries and soup kitchens to help supplement their food needs. In the last, I'd say, 10 years, we've seen that shift towards agencies now. Many of them are open all the time. It has nothing to do with the time of the month. It has to do with the need that has grown, and certainly in the last few years with the economic challenges that we've faced, more and more of our member agencies are reporting that they're seeing middle-class people, folks who had a job a couple of months ago and now are at a point because your food bill is the one thing you can control, are coming for the help that they need. So there has been that shift from, you know, the idea of food pantries and soup kitchens helping the poor who are on public assistance to anybody's at a food pantry now.
You've been with the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley for almost 25 years. Certainly we've been through tough economic times before, the ebb and flow of economic times. Does this seem more dire?
This is the worst I've ever seen it in 25 years. I can honestly say that the number of agencies that are increasing who want membership in the food bank, the reports that they give us, you know, the from the folks who really are the boots on the street. And when we speak to Darlene later, you'll hear exactly what's going on. They report that they are seeing phenomenal increases in the number of people who need help.
And what's really interesting too is that so many of them have working adults in the households, people who have jobs, and they still can't afford food, and they're working, and it's shocking, and that's something that's new too. Usually in the past it had been really people who were out of work or unemployed in that sense, but now we're finding that more and more of them actually are working. They just can't afford food.
And in this political season that we're in right now, a lot is being made about the divide between the very wealthy, the 1% and the 99%, and the almost elimination of the middle class. And I heard one of your public service announcements recently where you talk about the struggling class.
That's who we're seeing more and more. They're really middle class people. They were middle class people who are now the struggling class, and that's a growing class of people in America, and it's a bad trend.
Well, I saw a political cartoon recently, and it showed a family in China, and the mother is saying to the Chinese child, "Eat all your food because there are starving children in America." And that's kind of extraordinary that, for instance, I read a story in the Daily Freeman a couple months back that there are food programs in Kingston to feed children over the weekend who get fed in school but have no recourse. They're hungry over the weekend. And again, that's just extraordinary. Let's talk about funding the food bank. Do you get money from national organizations, from grants, in addition to donations from the public?
There are grants that the food pantries and soup kitchens get, and those grants are called HIPNAP grants. And those are used to help support the food bank and with the shared maintenance. And most of the money for the food bank operations is actually donated. We do different fundraisers throughout the year, and it's just the generosity of the public that really keeps us going. 99%, I would say.
We're very fortunate. I believe we have widespread support from the community, and as a result, the food bank has quite a few revenue streams. Whether it is HIPNAP funding through New York State or USDA commodities from the federal government is a grant that we apply for, and we administer the USDA program here in this area, or grants from private foundations like the Dyson Foundation in Dutchess County, or direct mail campaign, or special events, or any one of a number of ways in which the food bank, I think, is very healthy financially, and we certainly appreciate the support we get from the community to ensure our fiscal future.
Great. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Reverend Darlene Kelley, who is on the front lines of the hunger issue here in Kingston. This is Kingston Now. We'll be back in just a moment. You're watching Kingston Now, and we're joined by the Reverend Darlene Kelley of the United Methodist Church of Kingston. Now, Reverend, you've been watching this show from the control room, so you've heard what we've been talking about, and we've been talking about the structure of the food bank of the Hudson Valley and how they provide stuff to food pantries like your own. I'd love to hear from you what that's like on the front lines when people show up to get food. Describe that experience.
Well, it's a sad experience most of the time. We have a lot of folks who have never had to go to a pantry before. I heard that you were speaking earlier, we could not do this without the food bank. They're vital to our program. So the food comes from you guys, and that allows us to feed folks. And we have more and more working poor. You guys were talking about that as well, how the middle class is really suffering. People have lost their hope in getting a job. They've been unemployed for a long time. So we have lots of folks who have never had to use a pantry before, never had to use a soup kitchen before, and they're there for the first time, and it's heartbreaking.
Tell me about the amount of food that you distribute. Is it every day?
Every day, so every weekday. So Monday through Friday, we have a hot lunch at noon, and then we can give food boxes, pantry boxes, to families that have some food scarcity later that night or through the weekend. So we're trying to help the whole family, feed the whole family.
Is there a stigma attached to being hungry? I mean, a moment ago you were talking about it's kind of sad, but are people ashamed of being hungry?
I think that's true. I think it's very true that people are ashamed of that. We've talked about sort of the beating up of the poor politically this year. I think there's a lot of that going on. We have sort of this American, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and if it's your fault if something's wrong. But we have mental illness, we have drug and alcohol addiction, we have families that are breaking up, we have a high unemployment rate, and all of those factors join together to put such pressure on families today, especially middle class and lower middle class families. And so a lot of folks are feeling hunger for the first time or food scarcity for the first time. There's a great deal of shame in that. There's a feeling of failure. If you have to decide that you and your husband, a woman came in to me and said, I have 4 chicken legs, chicken drumsticks in my freezer. That's what I have left. And I've got 4 kids. So the kids all have a drumstick. My husband and I won't eat. It's heartbreaking.
I heard an interesting story. I was visiting a food pantry in Woodstock, actually, and the woman who runs that, Thurman Greco, was telling me a story about how she was trying to get some people to come in who were ashamed to come in. Some of them were senior citizens. These are people who have worked all their lives. They're living on fixed income, Social Security, and they can't afford food, but they won't come into the food pantry. So she actually has volunteers that will pack bags and in the middle of the night take them to their homes so that their neighbors don't know that they're getting help.
How do you get the word out to the public that these services exist? Darlene, how do you get the word out to the people in the area, your churches on Clinton Avenue here in Kingston, that there's a food pantry and food available?
I think we've been there so long. I think that word of mouth is one of the things that just naturally happens, so that folks know that there's a place to eat during the day, and they know, to come there at noon for, a meal. Other than that, other churches sort of have us on the roster. I think we get referrals from places like Family and from ARC, and different agencies will call me sometimes to check, can I send a family over, or do you have food right now? So we sort of interagency a lot, I think, as well.
And Jan, what about outreach for the food bank as a whole?
Well, and as a follow-up to what Darlene was saying, I was going to say we often have individuals who call the food bank thinking that we feed individuals and not really understanding that it's a warehousing operation supplying the food to food pantries. And we have a referral list, so whatever area they're calling from in 6 counties, we make sure that they know the agencies that are providing food in their areas.
I also want to follow up on something we talked about off the air a few moments ago, which is that the poverty level in the United States is pegged at something like 15% of the population is at poverty level.
Right. It is estimated that 15% of Americans live at or below the poverty line. But then, the topic recently has been, well, what do you mean when you say people are poor? So if you factor in that they estimate 43% of Americans are just one crisis away from being at that poverty level, and those things include losing your job, losing your home, having a health issue that translates into you can't work, and all of a sudden, like many of our mortgages, you find yourself underwater.
Indeed. The people that you were describing a moment ago, Ron, the elderly who may be ashamed to come in, a lot of people don't think they're poor, right?
Right. That's true. A lot of people just think that this is normal, and a lot of them don't know that there are places they can go, and that it's nothing to be ashamed of. And we're getting more and more people to come into the food pantries and the soup kitchens, despite their initial, hesitation to do it, because really they just don't have any choice.
And the idea of feeding the hungry, the practice of feeding the hungry, is such a basic need to have food in your stomach just to function.
Certainly.
How does that affect you all individually on a day-to-day basis? I'll start with you, Darlene.
Well, I like to see the whole person. So I like to look at someone that's come in and say, what can we do to help that person get to the next point? So several years ago, our church started a GED program. We work with BOCES. So Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, you can eat and then you can go to GED class. We have NA meetings. So if your problem is that you are out there because you have a drug or an alcohol problem, we want to address that. So as a church, as a faith community, we're trying to look at the whole person, physically, emotionally, spiritually, because I think we're hungry in all ways.
But personally, you, like for instance, when you were talking a few moments ago about that woman with the 4 drumsticks and she's going to go hungry, I think you started to get a little
right.
choked up.
It's not an easy job.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly we want to have as much compassion. I'm a pastor. I'm trying to follow Christ. So that compassion that you have for the other, the love that you give for the other, that's where we heal. And the hunger is part of it. So you help feed someone and then you help them learn how to feed themselves, or you help them, try to get to a new place in their lives. So I'm trying to address the whole person.
Well, it's terrific work you're all doing, and we thank you for being here to talk about it today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.
That's it for this week's show. We'd like to thank Jan Whitman and Ron Van Wormer of the Food Bank of the Hudson Valley and the Reverend Darlene Kelley of the United Methodist Church of Kingston for joining us. To find out more about the Food Bank or to make a donation, go to foodbankofhudsonvalley.org or find them on Facebook. You can find Kingston Now on Facebook too, and be sure to check out our past shows on our YouTube channel. For Kingston Now, I'm Jimmy Buff. See you next time.